Hello devs, welcome back to another video. Today we're finally going to be building an app. We're going to be building a to-do list app called Fire App To Do. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Akash, and here at Fire App Dev I teach you how to build full stack, React Native, and Firebase apps from start to finish. Today is part one of this to-do list app where we're going to be building part of the front end. This, I believe, is going to become a 4-part series. The first 2 parts are going to be building the front end using React Native and Expo, and the second 2 parts are going to be incorporating that with Firebase for authentication and storage. So without further ado, let's get this video started. So let's take a quick look at what we're going to be building today. Right in front of us we have the Fire To Do app. You can go ahead and add a new list to the app. Call it Fire To Do's, and we'll set it orange. Hit save, and you can go inside these lists and you have your actual to-do list. This demo app is pre-populated with a couple items, but let's add something else. Do homework, and then we could also do record video, and there you go. You could scratch off these items, or you could go ahead and delete all of them. Go back, list 1, again it's a pre-populated list, a very similar thing. You can add or delete items, and you could also go ahead and edit your list. Say we want to call this one work, so we'll rename it work to-dos, and we'll go ahead and set the color to red, and we'll save that. Okay, so we're going to start off with a screen looking like this. This should be the basic layout for your project. If you don't know how to get to this project setup right here, I recommend you check out my previous video on how to set up Expo, React Native, and Node.js, pretty much the complete dev environment setup. So I'll probably put that in the cards or down in the description below. But once you are at the screen, you pretty much have started working on the app already. So this is the main app.js. This is pretty much the entry point for your app. And then if we just go through some of the folders, here we have package.json, which holds all of our node dependencies. So we have Expo, React, React Native. All 3 of those are pretty self-explanatory. And then we have React Native Web, which lets us render the React Native screen on the web, which we're going to be using for the video today. So let's get this started. Before we go ahead and start our React Native app, we have a couple more packages we need to install. So with this screen right here, you pretty much just have a basic React Native app. But what's an app without multiple screens? And what's multiple screens if you can't navigate between them easily? And here's exactly where React Navigation comes in. So go to your command prompt and navigate to the directory of your app. If you're new to this, it's just CD to change directory, to go to whatever directory you want. So I go to CD Documents, Projects, I believe it's in Fire App Dev, Content, and then Fire To Do App. Alright, yeah. So that's pretty much how you navigate to your directory. And you want to type in this following command. Let me just go ahead and paste that in real quick. So it's going to be npm install at React Navigation /native, which is a core React Navigation module, and also React Navigation /stack, which allows you to use the stack navigation. And I'll give that a minute to run. Okay, now that we have that installed, we're not quite done yet. Type in this command as well. Expo install React Native reanimated, React Native gesture handler, React Native screens, React Native safe area context, and React Native community masked view. These are all just a few peer dependencies you need to use with React Navigation. So just go ahead and install all of those. Okay, now we should have all of that installed. Let's just go check out our package.json real quick. And there we have all of them. React Navigation, the masked view, gesture handler, screen, safe area context, all of that. So we should be good to go. At this point, we can go ahead and get the app started. So I'm going to run npm run. Let me zoom into this a little bit so you can see this a lot better. There you go. npm run web, which is pretty much running this command right here, expo start web, and this should start the app in your browser. And once it's in your browser, what you want to do is go ahead and right click and click inspect. Ideally you're on Chrome, and once you click inspect, there should be a small mobile icon at the top, and click on that so it looks like a little mobile screen. Otherwise, if you don't want to run it on the web, you could also run it on your device. Just go ahead and download that Expo app, and you should be able to run it on any device you want. Whatever the Expo screen pops up, it should give out this QR code. Just scan that with your Expo app and you should be able to run it. But now you should have an app running that looks something like that. It should just say hello world. And we can go ahead and play around with the hello world text right here in your app.js. Let's just change it to hello fire app devs. Go ahead and save that, and as you can see, it updated to hello fire app devs. It's pretty simple. And if you are new to React Native, this is pretty much how React and React Native are going to be laid out. The syntax is very similar to HTML, but it is not quite HTML. It is called JSX, and it's just sugarcoating pretty much for JavaScript. So this HTML looking text actually compiles to JavaScript in the background. Now, throughout this video, I'm not going to be going too in-depth into React and React Native concepts. I'm going to assume you know the basics. This is mainly going to be focused on actually developing the app. So let's get started by setting up the navigation. To start off, we're going to get rid of the status bar because we don't really need that. Save that. And then we're going to go ahead and import the navigation container. From React navigation /native. And your entire app is going to be surrounded by this container to get navigation to work properly. And then you're going to do import create stack navigator from React navigation stack, which is going to allow us to set up the actual stack navigator, and type in const stack is equal to create stack navigator, and this creates the stack navigator for us. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the navigation container, which is a component. Remember, for those of you who are new to this, everything in React and React Native is a component. Components are just pieces of reusable code which make coding very easy and convenient, because you can pretty much say you want to code a button, you can code one button and reuse it in multiple places very efficiently, which is what makes React Native so amazing. So now that we put all this inside the navigation container, we want to actually render our first screen. So we're going to put everything inside a stack.navigator. And inside the stack.navigator, we're going to do stack.screen. Name equals, we can name our screen whatever we want. I'm going to name it Fire to Do. And then component equals, we're going to have to create a component. So we're going to take this and then toss it in its own component. Now the components I'm going to be using for this video are called functional components. So we'll call this const fire to do app equals, this is just JavaScript notation for a Lambda function, which is going to return this right here. And we're going to pass that into this component right here. So usually you see that we put components inside components like HTML. But for the stack.screen, we actually pass the Fire To Do app component in as a prop. Props are how you pass information from a parent component, which the parent component for all of this is the app component, the top level component. And for the app component to pass information into any of its children component, you're going to have to pass it in as a prop. So let's go ahead and save that. Oh, and hold up, we're getting a quick error right here. Oh, there you go. Just had to refresh, and there it is. If you closely look at the screen, you can see at the top we have this little navigation or title bar now, which says Fire To Do, which is the same name as this. If we go ahead and change it to just Fire App and save it, you notice it updates in the top right there. So there we go. We have our first screen already. Ideally, we do not want to load this app.js with all of these components. We're going to want to put each screen in its own separate JavaScript page just to keep everything organized. You can have it all in one single page, but then you're going to end up with this gigantic page of code that's going to look really ugly and be really hard to navigate. So let's go ahead and make a folder called Screens. And in the Screens folder, I'm going to make Fire To Do, or you know what, let's just call it Home. Home.js. And I'm just going to copy this right up here, paste it. You need to import React, so all the React works, and then these specific components from React Native. And then you're going to want to make sure you're actually exporting this component so other pages can import it. Export. And then we're going to go ahead and copy this right here. See. Yeah. And there we go. This means we're exporting this function right here. This is the default export for the page. And we'll format that to look nice and clean. I don't know why my prettier extension is not working. Let me click on that. Maybe I gotta change the settings to keep it pretty unsafe. But we're gonna go back here, and now instead of having Fire App To Do app right there, we're gonna do import home from screens. We'll do /screen/home. And then instead of Fire To Do app right here, we're going to pass in home, hit save. Whoa! We got an error. Styles is not defined. Oh yeah, we forgot to copy the styles over. So let's copy those styles over there. And then there you go. Everything's working nice and clean. And right here, we can keep typing whatever we want. To-dos. You can see everything still updates properly, and then we'll clean up this page right here by getting rid of these useless imports from React Native. And just like that, we have our first screen. So this screen is pretty much going to be our home screen for the app. What we're going to add here is a bunch of boxes that represent different folders for to-do lists. So for the app, we're going to have multiple to-do lists, which you can add or create entirely new to-do lists. And then once you click inside those boxes, it's going to take you to a separate screen where you can actually add items to the individual to-do lists. Before we get started with the list button, there's going to be a couple things I'm just going to copy in. So first, we're going to make a folder called constants. Oh, whoops. Constants. And in this folder, we're going to copy paste this file called colors.js. and I'll show you the file and leave it up on the screen a little bit so you can add this. But what this has is it just exports a bunch of colors I want to use throughout the app. For any React or React Native app, it's useful to have a file like this, because say you want to change the color for red after using it in a million different places. Instead of going to every single spot and updating the color, you can just update it in this one file and it'll instantly update in every spot in the app. So organizationally speaking, it is very convenient. And next, another thing we're going to do is copy over a bunch of styles, because the focus on this is about actually building the app and not styling it. But I will go through the styles from time to time and tell you what's what. So we're going to get rid of the styles we have right here and paste these in. And we'll start from this spot right here. So we just have a view. A view is, you can pretty much think of it like a div in HTML. And a view, everything in React pretty much goes in some type of view component. This view gets this container style called flex1 and flexbox1, which makes it expand throughout and fill out the entire screen. And we're just setting the background color to white. And then let's also go ahead and import colors from /constant/colors. Okay, and another thing we're going to be importing is called a touchable opacity. Now this is how we're going to be creating all our buttons in React Native using this touchable opacity component. So let's get started. We'll just make our first button, our list button, which is eventually going to take us to the list screen. So it's called touchable opacity, and it takes in the prop on press. And this pretty much runs a function every time you press this touchable opacity. For now, we'll just put in an empty function. We're not going to have this do anything quite yet. And then we'll give it a style. And we'll do styles dot item container. Yeah, the touchable opacity. This is our item container style right here. It sets the flex direction to row. In React Native, your flex direction is vertical by default. I believe they call column, and everything renders from top to bottom. When we set the flex direction to row, all your child components we're going to put inside touchable opacity is going to start rendering from left to right. And then we have justify content space between, which means for all the children item, it's going to distribute the space evenly between it, so they're going to be pushed to the edges. I'll show you in a second when I add some child items. Align item center, make sure everything is nice and centered. Then we just give it a height, make it flex throughout the width. I'll give it a border radius of 20, give it a margin and some padding, just to make everything look nice and pretty. Inside the touchable opacity, let's do another view. Inside this view, we're going to put in some text. We'll put style is equal to styles.item title. This is going to hold the title of our eventual to-do list. And inside, we'll just say list 1 for now. And then let me go ahead and save this. Refresh the Chrome page. Okay, and we got nothing because we don't have a background color yet on the style. So let's give it a background color for now of colors.blue. Not black, blue. Okay, and there we go. We have somewhat of a list box. Obviously, we're going to style it up and make sure it's a lot shorter later, but let's keep carrying on with it for now. Now we're going to have another view, and we're going to give it a style of just flex direction row. And the reason I'm putting this text into the view, and now I'm going to add some icons, and the reason I'm putting these into separate views is because the children of the touchable opacity are styled directly. If I didn't put them in their own separate views, they would all be rendered in a row with space between. But we want the buttons, these icons I'm going to add in, to stick together and the text to be by itself. So we're going to separate it into two views. And that way the touchable opacity only has two children. One it's going to render on the left and the other it's going to render on the right. So let's go ahead and see how that looks. I'm going to add a button right here. And we're going to do on press. Again, we won't have this button having any functionality for now. And then we'll give this button a little icon. So let's go ahead and import ion icons. It should already be here with Expo. So ion icons. From Expo / vector icons. And then inside this touchable opacity, which again is a button, we'll render an icon. And this icon is going to be an options button. So we'll call it an options outline. Give it a size of 24. And we'll set the color just equal to white for now. White is the only color I don't actually import from the colors, because white I always keep the same everywhere. You can still go ahead, put in colors and import it from there if you would like to. And this is going to be an options button, and then we can just copy over here. And we'll add a delete button in case we want to delete the list. So we'll just change the name of the icon to a trash outline. And we'll go ahead and save it. Give it a second. Ion icons is not keep. Let me make that a lowercase I. And there it is. You can see those tiny buttons right there. And now all we have to do is add functionality to the options button and the delete button. But what we're going to add the functionality later. We're just strictly doing the UI for now. And if you notice, we have one button now, but we're going to want to have multiple buttons. So how do we do that? How do we efficiently render multiple buttons on the screen? Well, first thing we have to do is we can move this entire button out into its own mini component. So let me do that up here for now. We'll call it list button equals. And we'll just copy paste this over there. And that's another functional component we have right up here, which we can just output right here, list button, just like that. And when I refresh, and everything is still there. Let me just format this real quick. All right, there you go, looking nice and clean. And if I go ahead and toss another list button right here, you can see you have two list buttons. And if I toss another one, we got three list buttons, and so on. So that's pretty much how components work. Like I said before, you take this entire piece of code, package it up into one component, and now we can just copy paste this tiny line instead of having to type all of this over and over again, which is what makes React so powerful. Now, what if we don't want them all to be called list 1? Maybe I want list 1, list 2, list 3, or maybe it's going to be work, school, errands, or something like that. Well, to do that, we're going to have to change the title right here. And it's going to have to be different for each component. How do we make that happen? This is where props come in. We're going to want to do something like title equals, we'll call this one list one. Also with props, if you notice with style or with onPress, everything is surrounded by curly brackets if you want to execute any JavaScript code inside it. However, if you're just passing a string in, you don't have to surround it with curly brackets. You can still surround it with curly brackets, but it's just a little short form that you don't have to. So now we pass in title equal list one. Let's pass in list, or you know what, let's call it school work fun. So you got to plan out your fun to-dos as well. Okay, let's go ahead and save it. And you see it's still showing list one, list one, and list one. That's because we're passing this prop in and we're not actually doing anything with it in here. So we can take the props in using this props variable that's passed into every functional component. And we're going to use some fancy, first of all, let me show you how this works. So again, curly brackets anytime you want to run JavaScript inside JSX. And we do props dot title, lowercase t. And then there you go. We refresh it and we got school, work, and fun. And we're going to do something called object destructuring in JavaScript, where instead of taking in props directly, we're going to put these curly braces and just directly take in title. And then here we can, instead of doing props.title, we can just directly pass in title. And we're going to get the same effect. Again, this is called object destructuring. Not going to go too in depth into how that works. You can feel free to look it up. But yeah, instead of taking in props directly, you can just destructure the props object into its various properties. And we have a title right here. And we're going to leave it at that now for now, but in the future we're going to want to add more list buttons or remove these list buttons. And well, we want that to change dynamically. Right now, every time I copy paste it, it's a very static way of adding a new button. So to make it so it's easy to render a bunch of new buttons, to add more in or to remove some, we're going to use something called a list view. The list view is going to allow us to render a bunch of components based on some data, and it's going to make it all scrollable so you can scroll through everything. So let's get started with that. First, we're going to go ahead and import the flat list. And this is how we're going to render a list. And we're going to get rid of all the list buttons over here and just have a flat list. And then the flat list is going to take a prop called data, which is what we're going to use to render all the list. And the data for this is an actual array. And right here, we can pass in whatever data we want for each list. So we'll say each list button is formatted as an object where you get the title, colon, call it school. And then we'll maybe pass in a color too. Add some color to it, make each list button look different. Do color. And for now, we'll just have it be colors.red for this one. And let me go ahead, copy that. Call work. And we'll add colors.green for work. And next, we're also going to pass in something called render item to flat list, where we're going to be taking each item from the list, taking the data from it, and using that data to render a component. Then right here, we'll just pass in nothing for now, and then we'll close out the flat list. And inside this render item, we're going to have a function. And this function is going to be passed in something called it's just going to be, we can call it whatever we want. We can call it data, but I'm going to destructure this data item actually into item. And the item itself is going to be destructured into what we're getting up here. So we're going to get a title and a color, comma. We're also going to get an index. And index is going to be based on the index this has in the list. So the school item would have an index of 0, and the work item would have an index of 1. And then inside, we're actually going to return here a list button. So for each item up here, it's gonna generate a new list button. So we'll do list button, and then we'll do title equals title. And then we'll also pass in color equals color. And now we should have a little flat list, and we're not doing, or let me go ahead, save that, have it re-render. And look at that, we have 2 buttons now. We have the school and the work. If I go ahead and expand this list and say we add our fun list, and this one can be blue, and go ahead and save it. Let me format this a bit actually. So everything's nice and readable. Okay, and we have a fun button too. But you notice we're not doing anything with the color because we're not using the color prop anywhere in this component. So let's go ahead and get the color from the props. Again, this is destructuring the props object. Now we have the color. And let's get rid of the background color we put in right here. And instead, we can add it to the styles here. So every prop pretty much every component has a style prop you can pass into it. And with the style prop, you can add as many styles as you want. If you just want to add one style, you just pass in one styles object, as we have done here. But if you want to add more, you can make it a list and pass in more. And remember, you got to pass in the styles as an object. You can't just go ahead and type it directly. So we'll do background color, and then we'll set it to color. Go ahead and save it. There you go. We got red, green, and blue, a multicolored to-do list. And we have the basic structure of the homepage set up already. We got our Fire app with a bunch of to-do items. But again, nothing happens when we actually go ahead and click on any of these. You can click delete or options or on the button itself, and nothing happens because we haven't added any functionality to the buttons right here. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that when we click on school or work, it takes us to the actual to-do list itself. So to do that, first and foremost, we're going to have to go ahead and create a to-do list screen. So let's do that in screens. Create a new file called to-do list.js. So that's going to be our to-do list screen. And again, we're going to import our basic items right here. Not going to type that out again. So I'll grayed out because we're not using any of it quite yet. We'll just do export default. We're not going to do anything fancy with this quite yet. We'll just return a view. And save that. And actually, let me go ahead and import some styles in for the to-do list screen as well that we're going to be using in the future. And we'll pass in the style to this view component called styles.container. Whoops, forgot that little equal sign over here. It's screaming at me. And then we have this to-do list screen. What we're going to do is go ahead and import that to-do list screen in our app.js. So we're going to import ToDo List from screens/ToDo List. And we're going to create another screen in the same way. We're going to copy this right here, and we'll just leave the name ToDo List. And the component, instead of being home, is now going to be ToDo List, so it renders the ToDo List screen. And again, went ahead and saved it. We're not going to see anything because we haven't actually navigated to the ToDo List screen yet. So how do we go ahead and navigate to the ToDo List screen? Well, because we're using the stack navigator and the stack screen, every screen is going to get a prop automatically injected into it. You can't see it right here, but it's happening in the background where we're going to get the navigation prop. So again, you could either get in props and then do something like props.navigation to get it. But instead of doing that, I'm going to use JavaScript's object destructuring again and just get navigation like that. And what the basic functionality we want is when we click on the school button or work button, we want to go to their respective to-do list. So we're going to have the list button itself navigate. So let's do that by passing the navigation prop itself to the list button. Because again, any information we want to pass from a parent component to a child component, we do it through props. So we're going to do navigation equals navigation. Save that, and now we should be able to access navigation right here. And now, so that we navigate when we press the actual button, we want to modify this on press right here. This on press or this on press responds to the little icons, but this is the on press for the overall button. And right here we could do navigation dot, I believe it's navigation dot navigate, and then we pass in the name we set right here, so to-do list. Let me go ahead and save that. And now let's check out what happens when we click on school. Whoa, we're on the to-do list page right here, which is sweet. We could click on the work one. We navigate to the screen. And you notice it automatically adds a back button, which is one of the more convenient things using the stack navigator. And we can go back. So now we officially have an app that has more than one screen. But we notice the title for everything says to-do list. What if we wanted to say school or fun or something like that? Well, we wanted to render the title on top. So to do that, we're just gonna we can pass in parameters to the navigation route. So we can just do comma and pass in an object with everything we want to pass in. I'm going to pass in the title and the color. And hit save, and then let me clean this up right here. I really got to get the prettier VS Code extension working because the auto formatting helps so much. So we're passing in the title and the color. But we are actually going to have to use the title and color because if I go ahead and click on school, you notice nothing's happening. It's still not working. So we're going to go back to app.js and we're going to pass in another prop to the to-do list component. This screen right here. So what I'm going to pass in is this prop called options. And options gets an object passed in with a bunch of parameters, and we're going to destructure that to root because we only really care about the root. Let me put this whole thing in curly braces and do that. And inside, we're going to return an object. And inside this object, we're going to set title equal to root.params Root.params is where we're going to get this stuff, this title and color passed in. That's how we're going to access that. So we're going to do root.params.title. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'll re-render. And if we hit school, voila, it says school up there. And if we hit work, it says work up there. We have that perfectly. And let's also have it use the color. So maybe we want to make the header have the color of the list button. So the way we do that is we pass in another option called header style, where we can just pass in styles like we were doing before. Oops, forgot the little comma right here. And then I'm going to do background color is going to be root.params.color. Go ahead, save that, let it re-render. And there we have it. School is red, work is green, and fun is blue. And I don't know, black on red doesn't really look good, nor does it look good on green. So I'm going to go ahead and change that text to white. So we can do that by doing header tint color set to white. Now you might be wondering where I got this header tint color, header style, title. Where is all of that defined? All of this is pretty much defined in the React navigation library. And if you want to check out more about that, go ahead and pull up the React navigation official website. I'll put the link down in the description below. And you can just look up how to style headers with React navigation. And their fantastic documentation is going to show you these and a whole slew of other options you can customize with each page. So you can definitely go ahead and play around with that. And again, throughout this entire video, I encourage you to pause it, change some props, see how it affects the actual app, change colors, change the way components are structured, and really play around with it so you get a feel for how React Native works and how you can modify things with it. You're always going to learn better that way rather than just following along the video. But also feel free to follow along the videos. That's how you enjoy to learn. But let's take a look at school. And you look at that, the header is now white with the red background. And same with work and same with fun. So we added our first set of functionality to everything. And it's working pretty smoothly. Next, what we're going to add is the ability to add a new list, or we're going to delete the list. We're going to actually add functionality to this little delete button right here. So how do we make it so that the flat list can actually be modified? Well, we do that by modifying the data right here. And to make the data itself modifiable, first, let's go ahead and move this outside. We're going to do const list data equals that right here. Makes it simpler. And we can add a bunch of functions to modify this list data. Actually, let me just call it lists, plural, because this list, this is confusing naming, but this array has a bunch of to-do lists, because each is a list button, but so we're just going to call it list for now. And then let's make an add items function, const add item to list equals, we'll take an item in, that's going to be the item we're going to want to add in, and we'll do list.push item. So whenever you call add items to list, it should take the item you pass in and add it to this list right here. And let's add a quick button so we can add items. Maybe we'll add that button in the header. So let's create a new component. We'll call this component render add list icon equals this function right here, in which we're going to return. We're going to have a touchable opacity, because remember, every button you're going to want to add a touchable opacity on press equals, on press we want to add an item to the list, so we're going to do add item to list. When we need this passed into this, so we will take that in as a prop. And add item to list takes in an actual item. So let's just pass in a default item for now. We're going to do title is equal to title. And color is going to be, let's use a color. We haven't used it. Colors dot. Let's use olive. And there we have our touchable opacity. And inside this, we're going to add a text. Instead of using a legit icon, I'm just going to use a little plus sign. And then I'm going to pass in a style here. Well, it's styles.icon. Which just gives it padding and sets the font size to the icon of 24. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Nothing pops up yet because we're not actually using the render list icon. And oh, we have an error because list data isn't defined. Here, let's just change that from list data to list. Forgot to rename it. And there we have it. Now, how do we actually get the render add list icon onto the header up here? For that, we're going to have to import something called use layout effect. Whoops, we don't want all that extra stuff. Sometimes these snippets are annoying. So I'm just going to type it in. Use layout effect. Now, use layout effect is something called a React hook. Now, these hooks help us manage a bunch of life cycles of the component or the state of the component. We're going to get into all that in a bit, but it pretty much allows us to manage the state of the component, any changing parts of the component pretty easily. So we're going to use layout effect. Because right now, the way we have the component set up, we have all this right here. We have props coming in over here, but nothing's really dynamic. Nothing's really changing. We just have a static item rendered. Use layout effect is going to allow us to do some functions we need to do before the component's actually fully laid out or right as it's laid out. So we're going to do use layout effect, and we're going to do navigation dot set options. So you notice how we passed in some options right here. We could also modify these options by doing navigation.setOptions. And then we're going to pass into this a header right option, which tells it what to render on the right side of the header. And then we're going to do oh, hold up. Let me capitalize. Let me call it, instead of render add list icon. Remember, you always have to have your components start with a capital letter. That's a key thing to note for. And we're just going to do add list icon. And we're going to pass in add item to list as a prop. You know what? We can rename it up here to make it a little prettier up here. They don't always, and then we'll just do add item over here. And then here we'll just pass in add item to list. And then we'll do that. Go ahead and hit save. Oh, okay. Hold up. We need to pass it in like such. Okay, so it looks like header right doesn't take in a component. It just takes in a direct function you need to render. So let's go back and change it to render add list icon. And we'll just treat it as a function. Now remember, this isn't a functional component, but it's just a function which we're passing in a parameter to. So this will just do render add list icon, and we'll pass in the add item as a parameter. So add item to list. It's a parameter, and that should get it to work. Why is this giving me errors? Use layout effect. Object is not a function. Okay, let me see if I'm importing this properly. Use layout effect. Import it properly. We have a function. Navigation dot set options. Oh, that's why. My bad. So use layout effect is actually it's a React item, and I was importing it from the wrong spot. So that should go ahead and fix everything. Let me go ahead and hit save. Okay, there it is. So we have a little plus button right here. Let's go ahead and hit that plus button. Whoa, nothing's happening. Even though we're calling the add item right here, nothing is happening. Why is that? Because when a variable updates in a component, it doesn't actually trigger the component itself to re-render. So you don't see any change at all. To actually trigger the item to re-render, you're going to want to do something called storing everything in a state and then updating the actual state. Because anything that's changing that you want to cause the component to re-render, you're going to want to store in the state rather than directly storing it in a variable. Because updating any variable, again, is not going to cause your component to re-render. So we're going to get another hook called useState. And we're going to do const. And then useState is going to use something called list destructuring. It returns a list, and you can destructure it to, we'll call it list, and then set list equals useState. And then you can pass in the initial state to useState. So I'm going to pass in this list right here. We'll get rid of this list right here. And then we'll save it. Now list itself is stored as part of the state. And then if we click plus, still not changing, because just setting it as a state isn't enough, because doing list.push isn't going to change anything. You're going to actually have to set the state by using set list and then passing in list. And when we go ahead and save this, you're going to notice it still doesn't actually update, because the state notices that you're not actually updating the lists variable itself. You're just mutating the actual list. So the actual array itself is still the same, but you're just adding an item to the array. So the state doesn't register it as the list variable actually changing. So to fix this, you're going to want to pass in a new array and then pass in all the items of lists into that new array. And you're going to use that using something called a spread operator and pass it in like this. Let's hit save. Now if we hit plus, you see title pops up with that olive color. I don't like that olive color. It's not different enough from the other colors. Let's set it to orange. There you go. That looks much cooler. And now we're able to add a bunch of different lists, which is pretty cool. But how do I get rid of these? It's still taking up space and it's annoying. So let's make a function right here called remove item from list equals. And here we're going to take in an index. So we're going to remove a certain item from the list based on its index. And we're going to do list.splice index, 1. which tells it to get rid of exactly one item starting from the index. And then we're going to do the same thing. We got to remember to set list equals list. Save that, and we have to find a way to get the delete button to actually trigger the remove items from list. So let's go ahead and pass in this function to the list button. So right here, we're going to pass in a prop called onDelete. And the onDelete is going to map to the remove item from list. And then we're going to pass in the index from right here. Because remember, the flat list passes in not only the right item, but also the index of the item in the list. So this is a great way for us to keep track of the index, and we're going to pass that in. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save. You can go ahead, hit the delete button right here, and nothing happens because we're not actually using the onDelete and the list button. So let's go ahead and use that. We'll pull onDelete in right here. And for the icon with the trash outline, we're going to pass in onDelete. And as a matter of fact, instead of passing in this navigation component to the list button, which is unnecessary, we can just pass in something like onPress at a higher level over here, and we can just move this navigation code. Get rid of that right here. Let's get rid of all this extra stuff. And then instead of navigation, we can get an onPress right here. And we'll replace the onPress for this with onPress. And hit save. Now if we hit delete, it gets rid of it. If we hit add, we can add more, delete stuff. And if we click on it, it still takes us to the respective list page. Sweet. We can now add and delete these list buttons. So our app is really coming along. Now we're going to take a break from working on the actual list buttons and start working on the to-do list page now. Later, we're going to come back and modify this list button page, so when we add a list button, we can actually set the title and color as we add it, and we can also change the title and color when we hit the options. But we'll do that at the end. For now, we're just going to work on the to-do list itself. But all of that is going to be for next week's video, because this video has already gone on for long enough, a lot longer than I expected it to go. Stay tuned for next week's video, where I'm going to be finishing up the front end of the to-do list app. And if you enjoyed this video and it helped you in any way at all, do your boy a favor and hit that subscribe button down below and give me one of these bad boys, boom boom bomb, and hit that notification bell so you can get next week's video and finish this app. See ya.